Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good evening and welcome to Monthly Current Affairs. Today we are going to discuss the important developments from the world of international relations, which can be very important for your upcoming prelims and as well as for next year's mains examination. So first, let's start the discussion by looking at the topics that we are going to discuss today. I have chosen 8 important topics, and especially the first 4 topics require a detailed and thorough analysis. These are topics which can definitely appear as a mains question. So we need to cover these topics as comprehensively as possible. So stay with me for the next 2 hours so that we can complete all these topics with practice questions for both prelims and mains. And if you're liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, do comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start the discussion, I have a very important announcement. As the Diwali festival is approaching, Unacademy is all set to provide one of the lowest prices ever for a 12-month subscription. If you're looking to enroll for our classes, do enroll now because this special offer ends tomorrow. The offer will end on the 19th of October and you can avail the subscription at just 17,999, which will give you access to our live classes, the recorded lectures as well, and the test series, the study material, and the mentorship sessions as well. So those interested, click on the link provided in the video description. And on the subscription page, you might see a different fee. But to get the discounted price, you have to enter the code IAS English. So with this, let's begin and let's start with the first topic. The visit of Taliban's foreign minister to India. This was the biggest geopolitical development of the last few weeks as far as India's foreign policy is concerned. India has been warming up to the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, and we took a very big step when it comes to advancing our relations with the Taliban regime. The visit of Amir Khan Muttaqi, the foreign minister of the interim Afghan government, is indeed a big milestone in India's neighborhood diplomacy. So, this is the topic that we are going to begin with, and there are a lot of interesting things to discuss under this. So, let's start with a practice question first. Let's try and see whether you can answer this question, and then we will break down this topic completely so that you will be aware of all these basic facts which are needed to help you answer such questions. So, let's start with this question, and I want all of you to answer this in the comment section. Which of the following India funded projects are located in Afghanistan? Because India has made some big investments in Afghanistan in the last 20-25 years. There are some key projects that we have funded. So, based on that, this question has been picked. The Salma Hydropower Dam, Chabahar Railway Project, Zaranj Dilaram Highway. And these are your options. You can take a few seconds and try to provide the right answer. Let's see how many of you can answer this. Karan says D. Shri, Vishal, Tejaswini, all of them are saying D is the right answer. Okay, let's check. Salma Hydropower Dam is indeed a India-funded project in Afghanistan. Later, I'll show you the map. I'll show you where this project is located as well. So if there is a geography-based, map-based question in prelims, you should be able to answer that. The second one is incorrect. The Chabahar Railway project is in Iran, not in Afghanistan. Though it connects with Afghanistan, it's not located in Afghanistan. It's in Iran. And India is no longer part of the Chabahar Railway project. Though India has funded the construction of Chabahar port, and an Indian company operates one of the terminals at the Chabahar port even today. But the Chabahar railway project is now being pushed entirely by Iran, and Iran has dropped India out of the project few years ago. So it's neither located in Afghanistan nor it's an India funded project, and 2 is incorrect. The third one is absolutely correct. The Zaranj Dilaram Highway. It's a strategic highway built by India with Indian funds, with the effort of Indian workers. It basically connects the Iranian border with the ring road of Afghanistan that connects with all the major Afghan cities. Through the Zaranj Dilaram highway, India had established a link from the Chabahar port into Afghanistan, and this route could be extended beyond Kabul into northern Afghanistan and Central Asia as well. So this route would have allowed India to connect with Central Asian countries. And India shares very good ties with all the Central Asian nations. And in that regard, this project was very crucial for connectivity in the region, for transportation in the region. So 1 and 3 are correct. Option D is the right answer. Now let's look at the context of this visit of Amir Khan Mutaqi to India. See, Amir Khan Mutaqi is a globally designated terrorist. He has been designated by the UN Security Council's 1267 Sanctions Committee, also known as the Taliban Sanctions Committee or the Al Qaeda Sanctions Committee. And it's also known as the ISIS or Daesh Sanctions Committee. So, this is the platform at UNSC to designate global terrorists and to place sanctions on them. So, once an individual is listed by the 1267 Sanctions Committee as a global terrorist, all the UN member states are obligated to impose three types of sanctions on these designated terrorists. First, they have to impose economic sanctions, freeze all the known assets and all the wealth which is owned by the terrorist and by his known individuals and entities. Apart from financial sanctions, the UN members also have to apply a restriction on the movement of these designated terrorists. Meaning, if they detect their presence in their country, they're bound to detain, arrest the terrorist, and hand them over to the countries where they are wanted for terror activities. So it places a restriction on the ability of the terrorists to move from country to country. And third, they have to restrict access to arms and weapons to these designated terrorists so that they can't easily plan and execute terror attacks. These are the three types of sanctions that will apply on designated terrorists by the 1267 Sanctions Committee. And Amir Khan Mutaqi is one of them. In fact, the Taliban, which has captured power since 2021 and formed the interim government, it is largely comprised of such designated terrorists. For example, look at their interior minister, the home minister of the Taliban regime. It is one of the leaders of the Haqqani network, Sirajuddin Haqqani, who's the leader of a terrorist organization, the Haqqani network, which is a branch, a faction of the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban. The Haqqani network had previously carried out attacks on Indian interests, Indian targets in Afghanistan. You might have heard about the bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul, the planned and attempted terror attacks on Indian consulates, and as well as on Indian projects and Indian workers. In some of these attacks, Indian diplomats were killed as well. So these attacks have been carried out by the Haqqani network, and the leader of Haqqani network, Sirajuddin Haqqani, who's a globally designated terrorist, happens to be the current interim home minister, the interior minister of the Taliban regime. So the Taliban regime is largely made up of such designated terrorists, right from its figurehead, the supreme Taliban leader, to several ministers who are part of the cabinet. They're all designated terrorists. So when India invites a designated terrorist as a state dignitary and hosts the entire contingent, that would be a breach of our UN commitments. That's why India had to get special approval from the UNSC to make this visit happen. India approached the UNSC, the Sanctions Committee, asking for an exception to be made for the visit of Amir Khan Mutaqi to India. Now, I'm stressing on this point, I'm highlighting this point at the very beginning so that you can understand the significance of this visit. It shows the lengths to which India has gone to facilitate the arrival of a designated terrorist. We have basically rolled out the red carpet and extended all the state honors. So this shows that India is not just warming up to Taliban, but we are completely shifting our policy when it comes to dealing with the Taliban. Because if you look at the past, India had a very complex relationship with the Taliban. India had designated Taliban as a terrorist organization. India had never built official contacts with the Taliban, never in the past. But now, in the last 3-4 years, we are seeing a completely new approach, a realistic, pragmatic approach from India, which marks a turn in our policy towards Afghanistan. Because previously we were committed to certain ideals, committed to certain principles. But here we are being more driven by the pragmatic interest, the strategic interests, which can be satisfied by working with the Taliban regime. It is this shift in Indian foreign policy that you need to understand. As I told you, this is one of the milestone events in India's foreign policy. Our policy towards Afghanistan has come a full circle with India inviting Mutaki and hosting the foreign minister. So now the question is, will India officially recognize the Taliban regime? Would India officially establish diplomatic relations going forward? This is something we need to discuss, and we need to consider the other consequences as well. Because when India engages with such an extremist outfit, what would be the impact on India's global image? How would US and European powers perceive India's outreach to Taliban? Because as of now, please remember this, Russia is the only country to have officially recognized the Taliban regime as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. Apart from Russia, no other country in the world has officially recognized the Taliban regime. Not even Pakistan, not even China. Of course, they work with Taliban. China has been closely engaging with Taliban as well. Even Iran has done it. And Pakistan, of course, now has a very complex equation, which we are going to discuss in a short while. But there are few governments which engage with Taliban, but none of them have given official recognition to Taliban. Russia is the only one to have done it. So India is coming quite close to official recognition. So we have elevated our mission in Kabul to the diplomatic mission of India, the embassy of India. So that itself marks a big step from the Indian side. So while we are pursuing these real strategic interests of India, we need to understand what could be the shortcomings, what could be the side effects of this. What concerns should India be worried about? Can we really trust Taliban, which is a radical extremist political entity? Can we engage with such an organization? So, what would this mean for India's image in the region, across the world, amongst the global south, the developing, underdeveloped countries? Because Taliban is known to violate women rights. It is known to target religious minorities. And India has issues with these positions that Taliban takes. So, how will India navigate this? How will we balance our policy towards Afghanistan? These are the key questions that will come up. So, in order to understand and answer these questions, first you have to look at the brief history of Taliban. What is Taliban? Where did it originate? It all goes back to 1979 when the then Soviet Union, during the Cold War era, invaded Afghanistan to topple the then government of Afghanistan. From 1950s to 1970s, when the Cold War rivalries had begun, Soviet Union was the most influential power in Afghanistan. Because please remember, USSR shared direct borders with Afghanistan. The Central Asian countries of Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan that you see on the map, which currently have borders with Afghanistan, they were all part of the Soviet Republic. So USSR had direct borders, immediate borders with Afghanistan, and it wanted to retain its influence, the communist influence. This is where United States was making attempts to break the Soviet influence, to undermine the Soviet influence. So to prevent the further rise of American influence, USSR invaded the country in 1979, toppled the then government, which was actually pro-Soviet Union, and it essentially occupied the country for almost a decade. This Soviet invasion and occupation of Afghanistan by the Soviet troops, it enraged the native Pashtun community. The Pashtuns are the largest ethnic group found in southern eastern parts of Afghanistan along the borders with Pakistan. They're found across the border as well in Pakistan, in the Baloch region, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in the tribal belts of Pakistan. The Pashtun community was enraged by the Soviet invasion, and also they had a ideological and a fundamental difference. The Soviet regime, a communist regime, was completely atheist, whereas the Pashtuns and the native tribes of Afghanistan were more conservative with regard to their religious ideology, right? So if you look at the Pashtun community, they disliked the Soviet communist ideology. When Soviet influence was predominant in Afghanistan, Afghanistan was actually quite progressive in that regard when it comes to minority rights, women rights, Women were allowed not only to study but to work as well. Women would dress the way they want, and the strict Sharia, which you see today in Afghanistan, was not in place before 1979. So this was disliked by the conservative fundamentalists who were primarily from the Pashtuns. So there was a clear ideological religious divide between USSR and the Pashtuns, and they disliked the Soviet invasion because the Pashtuns have always resisted any sort of outside domination, be it Britain. The British were kicked out of Afghanistan in the 1800s. If you've read about the Anglo-Afghan wars, eventually Britain had to retreat, leading to the fall of the British Empire as far as its control over Afghanistan was concerned. Pakistan has tried many times to control Afghanistan and the Pashtun community, but Pakistan also has failed repeatedly. Or else the current war which is taking place between Afghanistan and Pakistan would not have happened. So Pashtuns are known to resist any sort of outside interference. No wonder Afghanistan is also referred to as the graveyard of empires, where the superpowers of the world have come, tried controlling it, and they have failed. Soviet Union would suffer the same fate. The Pashtuns would now launch an insurgent war against the Soviet forces which were occupying the country. The Afghan Mujahideen was established to fight the Soviet invasion, and this was a strategic opportunity for United States and its allies. The US saw this as a great opportunity to target the Soviet Union, to weaken the Soviet influence, and to hit back at the Soviet forces. So the US launched a covert war, a proxy war, by working with Pakistan and other allies like Saudi Arabia. And they essentially played the primary role to back and support the radicalization of Pashtuns. Saudi Arabia would pump massive amounts of money for radical madrasas, which were cultivated along the Af-Pak border, which is the Durand line. Pakistan would essentially work on behalf of the US. The CIA would pump money and weapons. Saudi Arabia would also bring in plenty of funds. And Pakistan would be executing their plan, their covert proxy war, by training and radicalizing the Pashtuns, by directly backing the Mujahideen, giving them military grade training. And that is how the terror infrastructure was set up along the Af-Pak border. Because for Pakistan, this was a bigger strategy. It was an opportunity for them to use Afghanistan as a strategic depth against India, to use Afghan soil, Afghan territory to target India, and as well as to safeguard its own forces and possibly, if required, nuclear weapons in case of a Indian attack into Pakistan. So that was the Pakistani mindset at that point, to use Afghanistan as their strategic depth, to use the Afghan territory to later target India, to cultivate anti-India terrorist groups when the opportunity arises. So Pakistan willingly worked with US, with the CIA, with Saudi intelligence to fund the Afghan Mujahideen and enabled the rise of the Mujahideen resistance. Eventually, Soviet forces were defeated. 1989, USSR retreated from the country. In fact, the loss of Soviet Union in Afghanistan became one of the reasons for the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union itself. Though Soviet Union had other internal problems as well, and communism in general was on the decline by late 1980s, the defeat in Afghanistan did accelerate the collapse of the USSR. So as the USSR troops retreated, Afghanistan basically broke out into a civil war of sorts. A power struggle broke out. There were different ethnic warlords. There were different ethnic tribes and clans trying to claim the power status in Kabul. So different governments were formed, different prime ministers, presidents came and went. And in the midst of this, a radical student organization was formed, which was a byproduct of the Afghan Mujahideen itself. And this was Taliban. In 1994, with the backing and support of Pakistan's ISI, with the blessings of Pakistani deep state, some of the younger Mujahideen members, such as Mullah Omar, the one-eyed sheikh, would go on to establish Taliban in Kandahar, in southern Afghanistan, which was the hotspot of Mujahideen's radical activity, which was the basic hub of the Pashtuns. So this is where the Taliban was formed, a much younger, a student-based organization, and with the stated aim of toppling the other warlords and the politicians, and capturing power in Afghanistan to establish a Islamic state, an Islamic emirate, to enforce the Sharia, to enforce conservative Islamic law. So very quickly, Taliban made quick inroads. It managed to eliminate some of the then leaders as well. It quickly captured territory, captured key cities, roads, and border points. And by 1996, Taliban had kicked out everybody and captured power in 1996. That's the first time Taliban came to power and turned the country into an Islamic emirate. So, as soon as this happened, India was quite alarmed because Taliban at this point was a puppet of Pakistan, controlled entirely by the ISI, by the Pakistani army, by the deep state. The deep state of Pakistan clearly had a leverage on the Afghan Taliban as they depended on Pakistan for support. So at this point, India broke ties with Taliban because Pakistan was already using Afghan territory and the border areas for nurturing anti India terrorist outfits. The same terror infrastructure that Pakistan had used for Afghan Mujahideen was now being diverted towards India to support the Khalistan movement and later Kashmir insurgency and terrorism. The same funds, weapons that Pakistan was receiving from US, from Saudi, were being diverted by the Pakistani intelligence agency to support the Khalistani terror outfits and as well as Kashmir-centric terror groups, be it Lashkar-e-Toiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, Harkatul Mujahideen, Al-Badr, and the others. Later, Jaish-e-Mohammed as well. So all these anti-India terror groups were not only nurtured by Pakistan, but they were given shelter by Taliban. And it would establish links between Al-Qaeda and these anti-India terrorist organizations. Taliban would not only shelter Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, but it would build contacts with the leaders of Lashkar, Jaish, and the others, creating a deadly security situation for India. So India shut down its embassy in Kabul. We cut off our ties. Taliban threw out the Indian diplomats as well. And we never had any engagement with the Taliban back then. In fact, India went one step ahead. We tried countering and targeting the Taliban by sponsoring the Northern Alliance, a coalition of northern tribes in Afghanistan who were opposed to the Pashtuns, who were opposed to the Taliban. For example, in the northern Hindu Kush region of Afghanistan, you have the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, and the other Central Asian tribes, even the Turks. They have a historical enmity with the Pashtuns from the south. So, India, along with Iran and as well as Russia, they formed a covert alliance and their respective intelligence agencies started funding and arming the Northern Alliance. India's RAW was actively involved in this covert war where we supported the Northern Alliance and its legendary leader, Ahmad Shah Massoud, also known as the Lion of the Panjshir Valley. So, through the Central Asian countries where Russia had influence, India was given access to military bases in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. India's RAW would use these former Soviet bases to pump money and weapons and all the support needed to support the Northern Alliance with Iran and Russia to prop the northern tribes as a resistance against the Taliban. So we were on the opposite sides of the secret war. While Taliban was a proxy of Pakistan and an asset for Pakistan, which was being used to target India, India was essentially trying to counter the Taliban using its own proxies. So imagine from there to India today rolling out the red carpet for Taliban's foreign minister, who's a designated terrorist. In hardly 3 decades, our foreign policy has completely turned around. That's why they say in international relations, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. 30 years ago, roughly, Taliban was our enemy. But today, we are embracing the Taliban and giving out state honors and essentially trying to build a functional relationship. If not officially recognizing the regime, we are at least trying to build a functional operational relationship with Taliban. So in international relations, things are very dynamic. It keeps on changing very quickly. And that's what makes this subject so beautiful, so interesting. So in 2001, that was the biggest turning point. The Taliban, which had sheltered Al Qaeda, would go on to carry out the 9/11 terror attacks. So, after the 9/11 attacks, United States declared a global war on terrorism. It was hunting Osama bin Laden and the other leaders of Al Qaeda and declared a war on Al Qaeda and other terrorist outfits. US demanded the Taliban to cooperate, but the Taliban regime, which was in power, refused to give up Al Qaeda. It refused to cooperate with Western countries. This again is a lesson for countries like United States. Because see, in a way, Taliban was a byproduct of the Afghan Mujahideen, which had been primarily funded and created by the US with the help of Pakistan. So whenever a country engages in sponsorship of extremism, it always comes back to bite you. It's like creating a Frankenstein's monster. If you're raising snakes in your backyard, right, you can't expect them to just bite your enemies. Someday it'll bite you as well. So Pakistan also has been learning that lesson of late, and the Americans also learned this lesson, how dangerous it is to fund extremist organizations and use them for geopolitical purposes. So now US had turned against the Taliban, declared a war on Afghanistan itself. It created a coalition force with the NATO countries by invoking Article 5, the principle of collective defense under the Washington Convention. All the NATO countries contributed troops, and US obtained UNSC approval to invade the country. It obtained the authorization from UNSC to invade Afghanistan to topple the Taliban regime and to go after Al Qaeda. And then I'm sure all of you know what happened. Very quickly, Taliban regime was toppled. US began a 2-decade war. And at the end of it, the Americans barely achieved anything. They did manage to weaken Al Qaeda. They did manage to eliminate some of the top leaders, including Osama bin Laden, who obviously was found hiding in Pakistan itself, right? Just a stone's throw from Rawalpindi, the very headquarters of the Pakistani military establishment, which clearly points towards the linkages between the deep state of Pakistan and these terrorist organizations. The US did weaken Taliban for some time. Taliban was driven out of the country and they shifted their base to Balochistan, to Quetta, including the leader of Taliban, Mullah Omar. They all shifted base to Pakistan, and United States continued its military presence for almost 2 decades. But eventually, this war became a war of attrition. US could not achieve the stated objectives. It got distracted by other unnecessary wars. It started an illegal war in Iraq. It would get involved in conflicts in Yemen, Somalia, then in Libya as well. So with this distraction, US lost focus on containing Taliban in Afghanistan. So slowly by 2007, 2008, Taliban started making a resurgence. They started building back their ground support. And by 2010, 2012, Taliban was back, it was rising back, and it was regaining that influence. Because they had got the time to regroup, to rearm. And Pakistan was still using Taliban as a leverage. So when the Americans were distracted in other unnecessary conflicts, Taliban made a big resurgence. And eventually it became a war of attrition, where every day Taliban was hitting back at the foreign forces, at the NATO coalition troops. All the other NATO members eventually got frustrated. They pulled out their troops. Britain, Australia, other European countries, they all pulled out their troops from Afghanistan. Eventually, it was only American troops who were left. So for the US, it became a priority to exit the country, exit this foreign war, and pull out the American troops. President Obama tried to pull out the troops but was unsuccessful. In fact, he ended up deploying more troops to first weaken Taliban and the terror groups before withdrawing, but that ended up becoming a disaster. And then comes Donald Trump, 2016 presidential elections, promising that he will bring back the American troops. Because every day the domestic pressure was growing in the US as to why are we fighting this foreign war? Every day our soldiers are getting slaughtered, coming back in body bags. So eventually Trump made this a foreign policy priority, part of his presidential campaign. So as soon as he came to power in the first term in 2016, he started directly engaging with Taliban. US started talking to the Taliban directly with the mediation of Qatar in Doha, where Taliban was allowed to have a political office. And this led to the Doha Peace Agreement in 2020. US Taliban signed a peace agreement, paving the way for US to withdraw from the country and essentially giving a free pass to Taliban to run over the country and take over the administration. The Afghan civilian government, which had been installed by the US, which was an elected government, was completely sidelined from the talks process. This again shows the American approach. That's similar to what they are doing in Ukraine, excluding Ukrainian government and the people of Ukraine and trying to strike a deal directly with Russia to end the war. So they did something similar over here as well. You see this American hypocritical approach in Gaza as well, where the people of Gaza, Palestinians, are excluded and deals are being stuck between US, Israel, and the other stakeholders. So such peace agreements and ceasefire agreements will never last long. When you do not include the primary stakeholders, when you sideline and exclude them, those agreements will not hold for a long time. So Taliban eventually made a big resurgence. Once the American troops were out of the country, it quickly captured territory across the country and occupied all the key strategic locations, toppled the Afghan government, and took over the country again in 2021. So during this period, 2001 to 2021, what was India doing? Since Taliban was out of power and a US backed civilian government, an elected government was in power, India immediately engaged with Afghanistan, starting with the then Vajpayee government and then the Manmohan Singh government. We invested $3 billion in the country. We tried rebuilding Afghanistan, stabilizing Afghanistan, and we tried creating our own influence to counter Pakistan and to keep a check on terrorism in the region. India had become a significant player in Afghanistan. We had secured key mining projects. We had executed some important infrastructure projects. In 2017, India, Iran, and Afghanistan had signed a trilateral agreement for using Chabahar port for connectivity, for trade. And our plan, our dream was to extend this corridor to Central Asia as well. So now all of a sudden, India's dreams were crashing in 2021. India again had to evacuate all its diplomats and the Indian workers, shut down our mission through Operation Devi Shakti. We pulled out all the Indians and the friends of India as well in Afghanistan. But slowly, this time, India started making a different approach. Because this time, Taliban was slightly different. They had learned from their past mistakes. Previously, Taliban could never get global support and recognition because of their brutality, because of the way in which they were targeting religious minorities, the way in which they were oppressing women. So this time, Taliban, which was craving international recognition, started reaching out to India, and India was also responding. For the first time, we reached out to Taliban in Qatar, in Doha, when the Indian ambassador met with the Taliban representative in Doha in 2021, immediately after Taliban had captured power. This was the first time that we were officially contacting Taliban. Then after this, India has launched a completely new diplomacy which has unnerved Pakistan. Pakistan has been very worried about India's approach in the last 4 years. Pakistan did not anticipate this. After this first contact in Doha, we started providing assistance. Since we couldn't engage with the extremist outfit, we were directly providing food aid and assistance to the Afghan people who are friends of India. India has a lot of goodwill amongst the Afghan people. In fact, we also have tremendous soft power. Believe it or not, Bollywood movies, actors like Shah Rukh Khan, they are a huge rage in Afghanistan even today. So that creates an automatic leverage for India. So with the Afghan people to help them out during this crisis, India delivered food aid and assistance through the World Food Program. Instead of directly working with Taliban, indirectly through relief organizations like World Food Program, we channeled food aid and assistance. This impressed the Taliban. Taliban realized that India could be of help. They had seen India's big investments in the past. India had pumped $3 billion with very useful projects which would help the country, which would help the people of Afghanistan. So Taliban realized that recognition from the world's largest democracy would be the biggest win for them. So they started opening up, and there was a reset in the India-Taliban ties when India reopened its embassy and designated it as a technical mission. Right? It doesn't still have the full status of an embassy because we don't have official diplomatic ties with Taliban. Of course, during the foreign minister's visit, we have elevated the technical mission to the status of a full diplomatic mission without giving official recognition to the regime. So with the opening of this technical mission, India started channeling disaster assistance. When Afghanistan was hit with floods, earthquakes, Taliban was in no position to handle the crisis. India delivered disaster management support. And this paved the way for high level interaction to begin. So starting this year, the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri met with Amir Khan Mutaki in Dubai. This was the senior most interaction we have ever had with Taliban. This was followed by a telephonic conversation between the two foreign ministers when Dr. Jaishankar picked up the phone after the Pahalgam attack and called up Amir Khan Mutaki. And the best part was Taliban not only expressed support for India, it condemned the Pahalgam attack, pointing fingers at Pakistan. It expressed support for India during Operation Sindoor when India launched attacks on Pakistan, on the terror targets in Pakistan. Now, this was a clear sign that something new was happening between India and Taliban. So, following this, the foreign minister's visit has taken place as it was highly anticipated. And during the visit, the big development was India has upgraded the technical mission in Kabul to a full fledged embassy. But we have not yet recognized the Taliban regime officially. So, as per international law, as per the Vienna Convention that defines diplomatic relations, we have not officially recognized Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, but the Indian mission has been elevated to the status of a diplomatic mission. So, what does this mean for India? And why are we engaging with an extremist group? As I told you, there are massive investments we have already made. We can't let this go waste into the drain. More importantly, Afghanistan is a country you can't ignore. Afghanistan is very crucial to connect with Central Asia. As I told you, Central Asian countries are very close to India. They are blessed with natural resources. They are willing to work with India to exploit the natural resources of the region, but we can't access them due to lack of connectivity. So, via the Chabahar port we have built in Iran, India's game plan was to use the Chabahar route, the road and the railway project that we were working with Iran, and link that with Zaran's Dilaram highway that you see here, which was built by India, funded by India, that connects with the Ring Road, the Golden Road, that links all the major Afghan cities like Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif, Kandahar, Kabul, Jalalabad. All the major cities are connected through this Ring Road. So this would give us complete access to Afghanistan, and we could easily extend this further into the Hindu Kush and towards the Central Asia region. Apart from this, we had built the Salma hydropower dam. India funded construction of the Kabul parliament to strengthen democracy in the country when there was an elected government. We built a network of hospitals, schools, gave disaster assistance. So these were the kind of investments we had made. A genuine effort which would be mutually beneficial, which would help in stabilizing the country. And today, this is what India is seeking to protect. Protect those investments. Protect the overall strategy that we have been following for the last 2 decades. And this puts us in a position to counter Pakistan and keep a check on terrorism in the region. Since Taliban also wants to work with India, they know that recognition from India or any engagement with India would be huge for them. So this is what paves the way for India-Taliban to get together. As Kautilya says in Arthashastra, Ari's Ari should be a mitra, enemy's enemy is a friend. So that's the strategy that you see being employed here. And what was interesting to me during the visit of the foreign minister was his visit to the Deoband school of thought, the famous Islamic seminary, Darul Ulm Deoband in Uttar Pradesh, where he was invited as a dignitary. This wouldn't have happened without the blessings of the Ministry of External Affairs and the government of India. So this is a very unique historical, cultural link between India and Taliban, India and Afghanistan that you need to know. You need to appreciate this. Amir Khan Mutaki was honored at Darul Ulm Deoband, and he basically highlighted the connection, the religious, spiritual, cultural link. Because Taliban's core ideology, the foundational ideology, is the Deobandi school of thought, which has wide global appeal, and it originated in this seminary, in this madrasa in Uttar Pradesh. And during his address, he called Darul Deoband as the alma mater of Taliban. Basically, Taliban is like the alumni of this school of thought, and he's not wrong. Though Taliban has taken the wrong path, misinterpreted the ideas, moved towards the extremist form of Wahhabism, Salafism, but the Deoband school of thought, which provides for a more moderate stand of Islam in the subcontinent, is something that binds India and several other Islamic nations where the Deoband school of thought is quite popular. In fact, the very origin of the Afghan Mujahideen, the core ideology of the Mujahideen and the Taliban, is rooted in the Deobandi ideology, which was taken by Abdul Haq, one of the preachers, a Maulvi from Deoband, from the Darul Ulum Deoband. He would go on to establish a similar madrasa in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Darul Ulum Haqqaniya, the Haqqani school of thought in the tribal belts of Northwest Frontier Province, which today is the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan, bordering Afghanistan. So, this is where the ideology got misinterpreted, moved towards the more radical conservative side. And it is the Haqqaniya school of thought which inspires the Pashtuns, which has served as the ideological foundation for the Afghan Mujahideen and the Taliban. And that is the connection that exists, which was actually highlighted during the foreign minister's visit. So though there is a problem here, I mean, it is slightly controversial. India did not hesitate to allow this to happen. Rather, India wanted this to happen. So that again shows the opportunities that are present for India to engage with Taliban. Now, what is interesting is how India Taliban have aligned together and Pakistan has turned out to be a common enemy of both. One statement which was made during the foreign minister's visit was very interesting. Mutaki acknowledged that India Taliban are neighbors. India Afghanistan are direct neighbors. Now, this is a message. It's an indirect message to Pakistan that Taliban stands with India over the Kashmir issue. Why? Because see, if you consider the entire state of J&K as it existed in 1947 when the partition happened, right? And eventually the instrument of accession that was signed by Raja Hari Singh, the then princely state completely acceded to the Indian Union, thus making the whole of J&K an integral part of the Indian Union, which means Gilgit-Baltistan, including the entire parts of Jammu and Kashmir, would be an integral part of India. So technically, on paper, we share a small border here with Afghanistan at the Wakhan corridor that you can see in the map. This narrow stretch of land in the Hindu Kush mountains that you can see here is the Wakhan corridor, where India, Afghanistan, they share a 96-kilometer border, very short border. From here, we can easily connect with Xinjiang of China. We can connect with Central Asian countries. But Pakistan has captured this territory right from 1947, and we refer to this as POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. So if Taliban says that India, Afghanistan are neighbors sharing a direct border, it means they are saying POK does not belong to Pakistan, it belongs to India. That's the indirect message going out. So there is a major falling out between Taliban and Pakistan, and that's where the opportunity lies for India, a strategic opportunity. Now, during this visit, a lot of agreements were signed. India has offered more assistance, especially in the field of healthcare. This is where people of Afghanistan are struggling. Taliban is not able to provide the basic services and essential administration. So India is setting up several research centers, hospitals. We are expanding the Indira Gandhi healthcare centers that were set up. We are setting up specialized centers for treating thalassemia patients, cancer patients, a dedicated trauma center, and maternity clinics are going to be funded by India. India has donated ambulances as well. And we are providing scholarships to Afghan students under the ICCR, the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, as a capacity building training program. See, even in the past, Afghan students, Afghan leaders, officials, they've always come to India for studies, for training, for capacity building. Look at their former presidents, Ashraf Ghani, Hamid Karzai. They were all largely trained in India. They studied in India as well. Many of their then military leaders, intelligence officials, they all were groomed and they grew up in India as well, being trained in Indian academies and institutions. So today we have a similar opportunity. For example, then we had one mining licenses. India had got a mining license, and Afghanistan has always been short on technical manpower. So Indian workers had to be sent on any project for building a road, for any mining project, etc. But now, if you can train the Afghan youth, you have a ready workforce. You don't have to risk Indian workers being deployed, right? Indian investments can flow in, and through Indian investments, Indian projects can be taken up by the working population of Afghanistan itself. So that's the long term strategy here. India is trying to build the capacity of the Afghan population, give them specialized training, ensure that the workforce is available so that our investments can fructify. Then India has re-established the dedicated air freight corridor for cargo movement. So India Afghanistan trade is likely to resume through the air route at least. So these are some very big developments. It points towards a complete reset in our relations, and it highlights the real politic that India is following, the realistic, pragmatic approach that we are following. But in diplomacy, you can't ignore idealism. You can't give up on your values and principles, right? India has always maintained a very good global image because of its commitment to certain ideals and values, which is a commitment to democratic rights, constitutional principles, a commitment to equal rights for everyone, inclusive rights for everyone, be it women, be it minorities, be it human rights in general, the basic human rights. This is what India has always stood for. So this is where the problems can also come up because Taliban's approach towards women, the way they have oppressed women under the Sharia, right? Taliban, even after coming back to power, though they appear to have a new image to the outside world, internally they are still oppressing their women. They have banned education, girl education. They banned women from workplaces. The strict, rigid dress code and social codes are back in force. Minorities have been targeted again. So this is what worries India. So how will it appear in front of the world for India to be engaging with such an extremist regime? What would it mean for our image in the global south? Because some countries have a very serious commitment when it comes to human rights. They may not really appreciate India's approach towards the Taliban. Western countries would use this to criticize India. While they themselves are very opportunistic, they would not lose this opportunity to condemn India for working with Taliban. So these are things we have to keep in mind because Taliban is unlikely to give up its extremist path. They might show some external moderation, right? That's just for the global audience. For example, we saw that during Mutaki's visit. In the first press conference, no women journalists were invited. It triggered a big uproar in India that how could India allow this to happen on our soil? How could this disrespect be shown towards Indian women and women journalists? Following this, Mutaki actually apologized. They held one more press conference and women journalists were invited, saying it was just a miss, it was not deliberate from them. That shows India does have some pull, some leverage, maybe to try and force Taliban to slightly change its behavior. And maybe it will not happen internally in Afghanistan, but at least externally, you might see some changes. But we have to be cautious and mindful of this because our global image is at stake. If India has to be seen as a responsible global power, it's always complicated when you're officially working with an extremist regime. How will you justify this in front of the UN? How will you justify this in front of the other developing, underdeveloped countries? Right? How will you justify this in front of the West, which is waiting for an opportunity to criticize India? So these are the challenges which will open up. And today, Taliban Pakistan might be fighting, right? But you never know. They might patch up, right? They have a history of working together. Pakistan always has that pull and influence over the Taliban. Maybe 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, or even who knows, few months down the line, they might patch up. They might end their current breakup, become friends again. And this could again pose a potential threat, a challenge for India. But however, one assurance is that Taliban has given a guarantee to India. It has promised Afghan soil will not be used anymore to target India. Now, this is quite important. Meaning, Taliban is saying that unlike the past, where we allowed Pakistan to use our soil to target your country, we will not let this happen this time. Because this time, Taliban is very, very serious about protecting its sovereignty. It doesn't want to be controlled by an outside power like Pakistan. Now, that is where maybe India can place faith. Because, as I said, Pashtuns are very particular about their independence. We have seen this throughout history. They rejected British interference. They rejected Soviet interference. They rejected American interference. They have rejected Pakistani interference as well. So maybe there is hope for India Taliban to work together, but the challenges will always remain. Now, let's take up a mains question. Let's quickly read the question and understand how to approach answer writing. See, the purpose of these sessions is not only to provide you critical analysis and help you cover all the important facts, it is also to help you write answers, think critically, present your views and opinions in mains answers, because this is where the real challenge lies in the UPSC exams. Trust me, prelims is always easy. If you prepare well, cover the entire syllabus, revise enough, if you cover all the basics and current affairs, you should be able to crack prelims. It's an elimination round to just eliminate the non-serious candidates. The real challenge is in the mains exam, where your critical thinking is tested. You have to write descriptive essay type answers, bring out your views and opinions. So simply mugging up from someone's notes, from someone's PPT, and trying to reproduce it will not help you in this exam, right? You need to develop a deeper understanding of these topics and present your viewpoints. So that will stand out in your answer. That's how you can score more marks. So please prioritize your answer writing, improve your answer writing skills. Nobody is born with good answer writing skills. It's a talent that you develop with practice, with consistent effort. So we will help you as much as possible. We'll stand with you as much as possible. So we always ensure that at least for some questions, we discuss the answer writing approach. Let's look at the question. Supporting the Afghan Taliban is a pragmatic and strategic necessity for India, but it raises serial moral and ideological concerns. Discuss. So it's a two-part question. So when you're reading a question, read it carefully, understand how many parts are there. Your answer has to do justice to all the sub-parts in the question. The first statement is saying that it's essential for India to engage with Taliban for pragmatic and strategic reasons. But there are certain moral ideological considerations, some concerns which we should be mindful of. That's what you need to discuss over here. The directive is to discuss this dilemma that India is facing. So in the introduction, you can introduce India's current ongoing engagement with Taliban post 2021. You can point out in the introduction that this is a new approach India is taking. It's a paradigm shift in our approach towards Afghanistan, where we are engaging with Taliban for the first time. And point out that it raises a dilemma for us between the realist school of thought and the idealist school of thought. On one hand, there is a real politic necessity, a strategic necessity for us to counter Pakistan, to counter terrorism, to protect our investments, to ensure we use Afghanistan to connect with Central Asia. It is required for us to work with Taliban. That is the realistic necessity for us. But there are challenges. India is a democratic nation with a strong commitment to uphold human rights. We have to be worried about our global image, right? How will we justify this to our own people? How will we justify this in front of the world? So this is where the dilemma lies for India, and we will explore this in the body and conclude on the right note. So in the body, you can start by explaining the strategic pragmatic necessity. Now, based on what we have studied, can't you give 3 points to explain why we have to work with Taliban? Just 3 points with some basic explanation and the right examples. Countering Pakistan, countering terrorism, protecting our investments. You can even add connecting with Central Asia as a separate point. So these are the 3, 4 strategic pragmatic priorities that we have. That's why we have to engage with Taliban. So justify that point. So this can be one paragraph. Next, the counterpoint to bring that balance in your answer. What are the moral, ideological concerns that are there? Concern about human rights, concern about women rights, minority rights, Taliban's continued engagement with extremist terrorist forces. The Taliban itself continues to follow the extremist path. This raises challenges for us, for our global image, for our relations with global South countries. We might face criticism from the West. So bring in those points over here and then provide your analysis. What should be the approach, the way forward? We should continue this balanced approach, ensure we maintain a balance between realism and the right ethical approach. Maybe the right thing to do for India is to not officially recognize Taliban regime, but work with them for all functional operational purposes, meaning give them assistance, engage with them, talk to them, focus on joint projects, joint initiatives, but don't give official recognition because no other country has done it except for Russia. So without recognizing the Taliban regime, India can continue to walk this middle path, this diplomatic tightrope. That's what we've been doing with most countries, most regions, be it US, Russia, be it the divide in West Asia, we always walk that middle path trying to satisfy all the parties. And that is the beauty of our independent foreign policy, the policy of multi alignment. So we can continue to justify our approach on strategic grounds while taking a moral stand when it comes to some core issues like human rights, women rights, etc. While we give all funds and assistance and support to Taliban, we should parallelly bring pressure on Taliban as well. Exert pressure using that leverage to make Taliban behave according to international norms. Try and ensure Taliban respects women's rights. Try and ensure it protects human rights, at least to the extent possible. That is what India can do. This should be very visible. At the global level, it should be visible that India is pushing Taliban to protect human rights and women rights and minority rights. And parallelly, if we engage with Taliban just for strategic operational reasons, that should be fine. So, in the conclusion, you have to maintain the consistency, the logical flow should be there. You can say that our engagement is driven by a strategic compulsion. We don't have a choice. Wish we had a more liberal setup in Afghanistan, but we don't. So you can't ignore this country. It's very important for us. So out of compulsion, we are forced to work with Taliban. But we always have a choice. We can always stand for the right moral, ethical issues. Bring that pressure on Taliban. That should be your concluding point. So this is how you build a well-structured, well-balanced answer. I hope the discussion is helpful for you. Now let's look at a related topic. Something very interesting is taking place in our neighborhood. Our dear neighbor Pakistan is dealing with a very, very serious problem. Right on the day when Mutaki was arriving in India, Pakistan carried out airstrikes in Kabul. It was targeting the TTP leadership. The leader, Noor Wali Masood, was supposedly the target. Pakistan was trying to take out the leader of another faction, another branch of Taliban, the Pakistan Taliban, which is allegedly sheltered by Afghan Taliban. Pakistan alleges that the Pak Taliban or Tehrik-e-Taliban-Pakistan (TTP) is supported by Afghan Taliban. See, as I said, the Pashtun community is spread on both sides of the Af-Pak border, right? Just like you have the Afghan Taliban, there is the Pakistan faction of Taliban as well. Their goal is exactly the same. These are like two brother organizations, ideologically connected to each other, supporting each other as well. And Pak Taliban's objective is very simple: to target Pakistani state, to throw out the Pakistani state and capture power to turn the country into an Islamic state, an Islamic emirate. So Pakistan's accusation is that Afghan Taliban is supporting the TTP, sheltering them, giving them a safe haven. And recently, TTP has stepped up its attacks in the last couple of years. And Pakistan has been retaliating, committing large scale human rights violations and atrocities from Balochistan to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It has conducted cross border strikes in Afghanistan. That's what we saw. Right on the day Mutaki was arriving in India, Pakistan conducted airstrikes in Kabul, trying to take out the leader of TTP. And this was not a coincidence. Trust me, there are no coincidences in geopolitics. Pakistan was sending a message to New Delhi, message to Kabul, that we don't appreciate your friendship. We don't appreciate your new relationship. And Taliban has retaliated. Taliban has gone to war with Pakistan. It has mobilized its fighters and its limited arsenal that it has. And it has managed to deliver a significant hit to Pakistan as well. So in the last few hours, the conflict has erupted again. And there are every signs that the conflict might escalate further. And as always, Pakistan is blaming it on India, that India is the one instigating Taliban. Now let's explore this topic, but first, a practice question for you. Let's see if you can answer this question. Consider the following statements. The Radcliffe Line marks the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's your first statement. The TTP, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, was founded in 1999 in the Kandahar province. What's the correct answer? You can take a couple of seconds, but it's fairly simple, straightforward question. If you know the origin of TTP, and if you're familiar with the geography of this region, you should be able to answer this question. Chirag says C, option C is the right answer. Karan, Tejaswini, Ansari are saying D and B. Okay, let's check the statements. Statement 1 is wrong. It's incorrect. Radcliffe Line is the boundary between India, Pakistan, and India, Bangladesh. It was a line drawn during partition of the Indian subcontinent to divide India and Pakistan by the Radcliffe Commission. The AF-Pak border was drawn by the Durand Commission. So it's called the Durand Line, not the Radcliffe Line. So it's incorrect. This is the line that Pashtuns do not respect. They don't treat this as the international border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. They reject the Durand Line as the boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The second statement is also wrong. TTP was not founded in 99 and not in the Kandahar province. In Kandahar, Afghan Taliban was founded in 1994 by Mullah Omar, correct? But the TTP was formed more recently in 2007 in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in the tribal belt of Pakistan. Previously, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was known as FATA, federally administered autonomous tribal areas. The Waziristan region, the Swat Valley that borders Afghanistan, right? That's where the mountainous Hindu Kush ranges are present as well, near Peshawar, which is a hotspot of terrorist activity. From Taliban to Haqqani network to Al Qaeda to even Lashkar and Jaish, they're all very active in this region. It's a terror hotspot. So, this is where the TTP was born. Because before 2007, Pakistan was assisting the Americans to target all the terror groups in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in the tribal belts. The CIA was conducting drone strikes on Al Qaeda targets, Taliban targets. This was not liked by the terror groups. They rejected the Pakistani approach. They all grouped together to target Pakistan itself. That is how the TTP was born, as a resistance against Pakistan, as an opposition to Pakistan working with the US to target these terror groups. It was established by Baitullah Masood, a Taliban leader from this region, in 2007. It was a direct retaliation for Pakistani support for American intelligence operations and airstrikes that were being conducted here. So that's how the TTP was born, with support from the local Pashtun community. And their goal is to replicate what Afghan Taliban have done in Afghanistan, which is to target the state, throw out the state, and capture power in Pakistan. So TTP is an existential threat for Pakistani state. So as I said, when you get involved with extremist entities, you will end up paying the price for it. And Pakistan is now paying the price for what it has done. The radicalization it has deliberately promoted, the way in which it has used terrorism as a part of its state policy just to target India, to destabilize India. Now, this is coming back to bite Pakistan. So, TTP has mounted major attacks on Pakistan in the last 2 decades. Remember the Peshawar school attack? Almost 148 or 140 school children were slaughtered by the TTP. It's a brutal organization. It has targeted Chinese workers and Chinese consulate in Karachi. It has targeted the CPEC project as well. Right? They reject Chinese involvement. They want to bring pressure on Pakistani state through China by targeting Chinese projects. So Pakistan conveniently blames this on India. Pakistan's accusation is India's RAW is funding TTP. Pakistan has never presented any proof. Not one shred of evidence has been given by the Pakistani state to prove any Indian involvement. India rejects this accusation, and it is a matter of fact that TTP enjoys the support of Afghan Taliban and the larger Pashtun community across the Durand Line. On both sides of the Durand Line, there is support for TTP from the Pashtuns. And Afghan Taliban, which is like a brother organization, has been sheltering the TTP. Because see, for TTP, it is a necessity to align with a larger group to target Pakistan. If the support does not come from Afghan Taliban, they might seek support from Islamic State, which has recently made a presence in this region. ISIS Khorasan, which is a branch of Islamic State along the Afpak border, would be ready to align with the TTP. So that would be a threat for Afghan Taliban, because there is an ideological enmity between the Taliban and the Islamic State. The Islamic State is much more radical, much more violent, much more brutal. Right? Their stated goal is to form a caliphate, whereas Taliban's goal is limited to as far as controlling Afghanistan is concerned. So they are in competition in a way, Taliban and ISIS. So if Afghan Taliban does not support TTP, does not shelter them and give them the backing, maybe they will align with ISIS, which could be much more dangerous for the Taliban regime itself. So this compulsion also forces Afghan Taliban to shelter the TTP. Plus, as I said, they have an ideological connection. They see them as a brother organization. There is a larger support base amongst the Pashtuns in the border belt. And that is what is driving Afghan Taliban to give that support to the TTP. And that's where they have a divide between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban. So here in this question, both statements are wrong. D is your right answer, neither one nor two. Now, why is this conflict taking place? This again is unprecedented because I told you Pakistan was the one which cultivated Taliban, enabled its creation, guided them, protected them during the US invasion. It protected the entire Taliban leadership at Quetta. That's why it was called the Quetta Shura under Mullah Omar, the founder of Taliban. Imagine when US was hunting Taliban leaders, Pakistan was safely sheltering them in Balochistan in Quetta. This is the kind of alliance they had before. But now look how things have turned around, how it has changed. As I said, the Durand Line dispute is at the heart of this. Pashtuns reject this as the international border. They want the Pashtun community to be reunited on both sides of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Next, the brotherly link between the two branches of Taliban, Afghan and Pak Taliban, the ideological connection they share. So, Afghan Taliban has indeed given some shelter and sanctuary for the TTP to flourish. In fact, when Taliban came to power in 2021, they were still working with Pakistan back then. And Afghan Taliban actually struck a ceasefire by negotiating with Pakistan and the TTP. For a brief period, at least until 2023, almost 2 years, TTP had stopped its attacks on Pakistani state because Afghan Taliban had managed to work out a ceasefire between them. But Afghan Taliban did not like Pakistan's constant interference. Pakistan was always trying to meddle. It first targeted Afghan refugees who were settled in Pakistan, right? Pushing them back. You might have seen the recent statement of Pakistan's defense minister. He has said Afghan refugees don't belong in Pakistan at all. They've been trying to push them back. And this is not liked by Afghan Taliban. It's not liked by the Pashtuns. Pakistan has used heavy military force with brutal atrocities being committed. Just 2 weeks back, you might remember, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there were massive explosions reportedly because of Pakistani bombings, where many civilians were killed. In Balochistan as well, Pakistan has been using brutal force to crush the insurgency. Now, there appears to be some sort of an alliance between the TTP and the Baloch groups. Following these bombings in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the last week of September, there were retaliatory attacks in the Balochistan region by the Baloch insurgent groups. That points towards a possible alliance between them. The Jafar Express, which had been hijacked few months back, it was bombed recently. Then the Baloch groups have carried out strikes against Pakistan in retaliation for the bombings in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This is where the initial problems began. The trigger was over here, where a lot of civilian killings were reported because of Pakistan's brutal use of military force. So this was followed by a retaliation from Afghanistan. As I said, Taliban is clearly asserting its sovereignty. They have made it clear to Pakistan that they do not appreciate the violation of its sovereignty. In the last couple of years, Pakistan has carried out multiple military and airstrikes on Afghan soil, on Afghan territory. As Pakistani forces are hunting the TTP, there have been Pakistani airstrikes which have been targeted on Afghan soil. There have been Pakistani ground operations which has extended into Afghanistan's territory. So Taliban rejects these cross-border operations as a violation, a breach of its sovereignty. So now Taliban had enough of it. When they struck Kabul, when the foreign minister was in India, Taliban decided to retaliate. Pakistan claimed it has killed the chief of TTP, the current head, Nurwali Masood, but TTP has rejected this allegation, saying the leader is still alive. And Afghan Taliban fully mobilized its troops and equipment it had, shut all the border crossing points. All the key border points were closed. and it has opened multi-front attacks on Pakistan. Pakistani army has suffered significant losses according to reports. Anywhere between 60 to more than 100 Pakistani soldiers have been killed. Pakistan also has retaliated with brutal force. Several civilians have lost their lives. Taliban also has suffered losses, but Pakistan appears to be taking a big hit as well. Now, this is quite embarrassing for Pakistan because Taliban is still a very rudimentary force. They don't have fighter jets, they don't have such powerful weapons. They simply have the assault rifles and some of the military hardware that Americans left behind. Some Humvees, some artillery guns, some rockets. That's it. Not more than that. Few helicopters. Pakistan is a very mighty military state, and they're not able to contain the Taliban threat, and they have taken significant hits. So this again puts Pakistan in a very awkward, embarrassing position. So now look at the map here. You can see the hotspots, particularly in the tribal belts of Pakistan, the Waziristan region. This would be the autonomous tribal area, which is today part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So this is where the flashpoints are present around Peshawar. Then down south in Balochistan as well, fire has been exchanged by Pakistan and the Taliban on the other side. So now Taliban has shut all the border crossings. You need to make a note of the important border crossing points. Let me show you on the map. Torkham, Spin Boldak. These are two very important border crossing points. Then we also have Chaman. There can be a map-based question, a geography question. Chaman, Spin Boldak, Torkham. These are the border crossing points between Afghanistan, Pakistan on the Durand line. Taliban has closed the border crossing points and launched deadly attacks on the Pakistani side, and Pakistan has retaliated. So, following 2 to 3 days of escalation and hundreds of casualties on both sides reached out and agreed for a ceasefire, and a 48-hour ceasefire was brought into effect. And during this conflict, when Taliban was defending its sovereignty, you know what was India's position? India backed Taliban's right to defend and protect its sovereignty. The foreign minister Butaki was still in India when the conflict broke out. So India gave unequivocal support, complete support to the Taliban, stating that Pakistan is the one destabilizing the region by sponsoring terrorism. And we supported the right of Taliban to defend Afghan sovereignty. This again shows the strategic alignment which has developed between India and Taliban. But Pakistan, as always, is known to break its word, break its promises. According to Taliban, this ceasefire was supposed to last and extend unless it was violated by Pakistan. Taliban had said, we are not going to breach the ceasefire. But Pakistan, in the last 24 hours, it has breached the ceasefire. You might have heard devastating news reports that Pakistan, just few hours ago, today early morning, has conducted deadly strikes again in Afghanistan in the Spin Boldak region. It has even targeted civilian population. Several strikes have landed in civilian neighborhoods, and 3 Afghan cricketers of the national cricket team have been killed in these attacks. Afghan Cricket Board has withdrawn from the Tri series, the T20 series, which was coming up with Pakistan in opposition to these attacks. And 3 Afghan cricketers from the national team have been killed in these Pakistani strikes. So there is every possibility that this situation might deteriorate even further. Pakistan has broken the ceasefire. Afghan Taliban will retaliate in some way or the other. So conflict, if it escalates, it presents an opportunity for India, but it could be a big risk as well for India. That's what you need to understand. What are the implications of this new conflict that has broken out in our neighborhood? The last 3, 4 years, honestly, has been absolutely chaotic for world order, world peace, and stability. From Ukraine to Gaza, India, Pakistan, Thailand, Cambodia, multiple conflicts in Africa, now US, Venezuela, right? Things are getting very, very volatile. And the last thing we wanted was another conflict, that too in our neighborhood, right in our backyard. On one hand, this might be an opportunity. If it's a limited conflict, it will allow for greater engagement between India Taliban, and it will allow us to jointly counter Pakistan and put pressure on Pakistan, maybe even counter terrorism together. We could target terror groups like Lashkar, Jaish, Al Qaeda, even ISIS Khorasan. Now, Taliban is rejecting all these entities. as the puppets of Pakistani state. There is credible intelligence reports from Indian intelligence agencies as well that the ISI has recently facilitated an alliance between ISIS Khorasan and Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Reportedly, Pakistan is forming a new alliance to target India, bringing ISIS Khorasan, which has links with the ISI, and making them work with Lashkar and Jaish to use this new outfit or the alliance between them to try and target India. Maybe the same network would be used to target Taliban as well. So this creates opportunities, as I said, but India will have to remain very, very vigilant. This could further the instability in the region. It could spread more extremism, terrorism, radicalism in the region. The Golden Crescent, that includes Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, is already a very vulnerable region. It's a hotspot for drug production, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, for radical extremist activities. So, any further destabilization of the Golden Crescent could be quite disastrous for the South Asia, West Asia, Central Asia region. Iran is already on a weaker footing because of Israeli and American strikes. And if Iran is on the back foot, there would be no check on some of the terror outfits operating on the other side of Afghanistan. Things could easily spiral out of control, right? India would be in no position to determine the course of events. Plus, the involvement of US, involvement of China, involvement of Saudi Arabia could complicate the equation, leading to greater destabilization because of the covert proxy wars that might erupt. So this is something India should be mindful of. We have to step up our border security, our intelligence networks. We have to build our partnerships with whoever is willing to work with us to counter terrorism. We have to work with regional partners and multilateral platforms like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the Moscow format, which is led by Russia. Moscow format was set up by Russia to mainly focus on stabilization of Afghanistan. Recently, Taliban has been admitted as a member of Moscow format. And India is part of it. China is part of it. Pakistan is part of it. Iran and Central Asian countries are part of it. So India will have to work with these regional platforms like SCO and Moscow format to try and stabilize the region, focus on development, reconstruction, focus on improving connectivity, linking Chabahar with Central Asia, widening the trade routes. This is what will bring more balance in this region. It would help even bring that pressure on Pakistan as well. So things are getting very interesting, very complex as far as our neighborhood is concerned. So take up this practice question. This is still a developing story. We'll continue to track this in the coming months, right? It's not going to end so soon. So this is a topic which will be relevant for, let's say, until your next mains as well. So please take up this practice question, what we have discussed, the points, and try to include them in the answers that you're going to write. Practice your answer writing as much as possible. The next two topics will take some time, but after that, the remaining topics are prelims oriented, so it won't take much of a time. So by another 55 minutes, I think we should be able to wrap up the class today. So as I said, it's a long marathon type of a session, almost 2 hours plus. I hope the discussions are fruitful. If you're liking it, do let me know through your likes, through your comments, and please share the video as well with other aspirants. The next big topic is India-UK relations. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited India. It was a high-profile visit. He brought with him more than 100 CEOs of British companies and industries, cementing the economic, trade, and strategic relations between India and UK. So this is another new development, a big development, as UK is a key partner, a developed country, a big market for Indian exports. India has a lot of investments in UK. We attract a lot of investments from UK. So that's why the topic is very important. Now let's start with a practice question, a prelims question. Please read your statements, take your time and try to answer this question. Consider the following. Indian diaspora in UK constitutes the largest ethnic minority in the country. India and UK recently signed a free trade agreement which has come into effect from May 2025. India and UK have currently stopped all military exercises due to pressure from United States. You need to identify the incorrect statements. Which statements are incorrect? Read carefully. It's asking you to identify the incorrect statements. Many of them are answering option C. Chirag, Praveen, Tejaswini, Kirti, and others. Okay, let's check the statements one by one. Indian diaspora in UK is indeed the largest ethnic minority in the United Kingdom. This is absolutely correct. There's a very large Indian community forming a cultural bond between the two countries. And the Indian community in UK is the largest diaspora community, the largest ethnic minority. Second statement is wrong. See, India UK recently signed an FTA, correct? In July, India UK signed an FTA, a free trade agreement was signed, the CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, but it has not come into effect. It will come into force maybe next year. By next July 2026, maybe it will come into effect. So, second statement is wrong. Though we have signed an FTA, it has not come into effect. Third one is also wrong. As of now, India, UK have not stopped any military exercises because there is pressure from United States. Yes, Trump's policies has created some complex challenges for India UK relationship as well, but military exercises have not been stopped. Just few days back, I think 10 days back, India UK held a naval exercise. The Konkan naval exercises were held. The third one is also incorrect. 2 and 3. Option C is your right answer. Now, let's briefly explore the background of India UK relations, and then we'll focus on the current nature of relationship, the outcomes of the Prime Minister's visit to India. India and Britain are, of course, bound by the colonial past, the colonial heritage. The bitter past binds us together. There is a close cultural link, a people to people relationship. But of course, you can't ignore or forget the bitter colonial past, the bitter colonial experience, how the British looted India, exploited India, engineered the downfall of the Indian economy, destroyed the native industries and agriculture, powered their industrial revolution through it, committed brutal human rights atrocities. So, this is now all in the past. Post independence, India has moved on from this. Though we have had our strategic differences with UK, because especially during Cold War period, UK had a pro-Pakistan bias from 1947, I would say till 1990s. UK has always shown a pro-Pakistan bias, be it over Kashmir issue, the first India-Pakistan war, when we took the matter to the United Nations. It was primarily the UK as a permanent member of the Security Council, which essentially pulled the UN towards the Pakistani position, favoring Pakistan over India. We have seen this again and again during 1965, 1971, with our nuclear weapons program as well. So there has always been a strategic difference between India and UK. But despite some of the differences, we have been very close to each other as well. It's a love hate relationship. We have had close economic ties. There is large scale trade opportunities that has always existed between the two countries. Lot of people to people engagement, mainly because of the Indians settled in the UK who prefer to go to UK for studies, to work in the United Kingdom. A lot of British companies, investors are investing in India. They look at India as a very attractive investment destination, a huge market, right? So there are plenty of opportunities where we have worked together as friends, as partners, but strategic differences have always been a feature of this relationship as well. Now, coming to the defense and strategic ties. See, today, in the last 2 decades, I would say, United Kingdom looks at India as a stabilizing force in the Indo-Pacific. Both are democracies, both believe in a rules-based order, and both have a common threat from China's rise and China's aggression. Don't forget, the UK is a declining power. At least in the last 30, 40 years, its economy has largely stagnated. Its military influence has gone down. Its diplomatic influence also has declined. So it badly needs partners like India for raw materials, for market, basically to export, to invest, and even for military support. in the Indian Ocean, in the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, in South China Sea, in the Pacific, where the UK is no longer the formidable military force it once was. It needs partners like India to combat and counter the threats, be it the threat of terrorism posed by groups like Al Qaeda, Islamic State, Lashkar, be it the threat posed by China, the threat of piracy, the threat of organized crime. So this naturally drives UK towards India. India also needs help and support from UK. UK has been a supplier of arms and weapons to India. Our aircraft carriers of the 60s and 70s, like INS Virat and Vikrant. I'm not talking about the new Vikrant, the old Vikrant and the Virat, which were decommissioned. Those were from the Royal British Navy, right? They played a pivotal role in 1971 war as well. The Jaguar fighter jets, the Hawk or intermediate jet trainers that we have, they're all of British origin. The M777 howitzer guns, the artilleries, which we have procured from US, it's essentially a British weapon of British origin. So there has been a close connection between our defense industries, between our armed forces. So today we have multiple joint military exercises between India and UK. So this can come as a prelims question. Please make a note. Note down the names of these military exercises. Ajaya warrior between the two armies. The Konkan exercise, which I was mentioning, between the two navies. Indradhanush between the two air forces. Konkan Shakti is a recently launched tri-service exercise where all three services are involved from both countries. It was launched recently in 2021. These are the four major military exercises along with close partnership between our defense industries. There is close collaboration when it comes to counterterrorism, intelligence sharing as well between our intelligence agencies. India has a concern about the support base that exists in the UK for Khalistani outfits. UK has adopted a very soft approach towards pro Khalistani factions and extremists operating in the UK. UK is a major home for Sikh diaspora. Some of the members have been radicalized towards the Khalistan cause, and UK has been quite lenient towards these Khalistani factions. So India has a major issue with this. So we are putting that pressure on UK to work together to counter terrorism, to not distinguish between extremist groups. Khalistani outfits are as much a threat, not just for India, for UK as well. Similar to any other terror outfit like Lashkar, Jaish, or even Al Qaeda. That's how India sees it. And we want UK to have the same approach, a uniform approach towards all forms of extremism. So this is one point of difference we do have, but there is close collaboration between our intelligence and security agencies to counter terrorism. There is sharing of intelligence as well. Then coming to the economic domain. Recently, the FTA that was signed, the CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, this will reduce the tariffs, bring down the tariff barriers, leading to greater exports from both sides. From India, there are a lot of goods and services exported to the UK market, from pharmaceuticals to textiles, gems and jewelry, leather, software exports, automobiles, engineering goods and components. So it's a huge market, a developed country. So it's a huge market for our agriculture, for our MSME sector. All these are job generating industries, labor intensive industries that create lakhs of jobs in India. Today, you have Indian companies that have invested heavily in the UK, from Tata to, let's say, Vedanta, and even other companies, the tech companies, for example, Infosys, TCS. Then we also have Shriram, Muthoot Finance in the finance sector. There are many Indian startups having a presence in the UK. So there's a lot of Indian investments today in the UK. There are Indian companies owning British businesses today. There are a lot of British investments in India, from aerospace to information technology, artificial intelligence. A lot of British companies are pumping money into India for their operations in India. Investments are flowing. VC funding is coming in. Because don't forget, London is a financial hub. And London is a key contributor for FDI investments into our country and even capital flow into our markets. So this trade agreement will cement that partnership. It will create new opportunities for increasing exports, for driving more investments, and This agreement is likely to come into force by next year, mid 2026 is when it is expected for the SETA to come into force. Now, during the visit of Keir Starmer, in the defense sector, India has signed a deal. A new contract has been signed. India is looking to procure British air defense missiles, the lightweight multi role missiles for the Indian Army to widen and boost our air defense cover. Operation Sindoor was a big lesson for India, though India very well defended its airspace. There is a need to plug the remaining gaps. Though India is focused on indigenization and our domestic weapon systems, we are looking to procure a established air defense platform from the UK, the lightweight multi-role missiles. Then UK will be helping India in shipbuilding, especially in electric propulsion. British companies like Rolls-Royce and the others, they would be helping Indian Navy and Indian defense manufacturers to fine-tune electric propulsion for the future warships that will be built in India. So these are some key defense technologies. Similarly, there are collaborations in the field of space, aerospace design, etc. And India, UK have decided to establish a innovation and connectivity center to drive joint research and development. There is a lot of focus on critical emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. They have created a partnership for securing critical supply chains, critical mineral supply chains. So they are building collaboration between the Indian and British private industries and between the government institutions and government sector as well. So these were some new initiatives that were announced during the Prime Minister's visit. Then in the field of education, British universities are going to set up campus in India very soon. University of Lancaster will be coming to Bengaluru with an offshore campus, and the University of Surrey will be setting up in Gift City in Gujarat. So this will drive opportunities for Indian students. UK has been a preferred destination for Indian students, but they do face problems with visa immigration policies of the UK. UK also is burdened by illegal migration from India. So we have signed a mobility migration partnership agreement, which can simplify the visa immigration process and help Britain to keep a check on illegal migration and deport the illegal migrants back to India. So some of the British universities are now being brought to India itself. So this drives collaboration in the education domain. Then in trade and investment, the industry associations are working together. The government is facilitating the reconstitution of a CEO forum. They are focusing on new age emerging sectors like clean, renewable energy, climate change, climate action efforts. UK is a leader in offshore wind power technology, and that is what India is looking to diversify into. So there is an offshore wind task force where British organizations, companies will help India to set up offshore wind power facilities. So, like this, multiple collaborations were announced, even in the field of healthcare, clean, renewable energy, as I said, then as well as in the field of climate change and climate action. So, this is a very broad and it's a defining partnership as far as the European continent is concerned. Because with European Union, India has been struggling to finalize the trade agreement. I'm sure you must be aware. India EU Free Trade Agreement, the BTIA, broad based trade and investment agreement, has still not been finalized. It's been many years. We have not been able to work out a final deal with the EU. Though it has been fast tracked and a deadline has been set, there are a lot of differences between both the sides. India is not able to agree for the higher standards, the hygiene, phytosanitary standards that European markets are expecting. We are not able to match their higher standards of labor, environment, and climate standards they're expecting through the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And European countries are not happy with India's tariff barriers and non tariff barriers, which is basically blocking out European investments and European goods into the Indian market. For example, how India protects its sensitive sectors like agriculture, then textiles and pharma, and even MSME industries. We protect them through higher tariffs. So that's not appreciated by the European Union. So we have not made a breakthrough with regard to this free trade agreement being negotiated. And on the other hand, thanks to Mr. Trump, US has become quite openly hostile, engaging in a trade war with India. The 50% tariffs have taken full effect. Just today, there was a report in the Hindu that few sectors in India have already experienced the impact. Their exports to US has declined by a big margin. Our textile exports have gone down. Pharma exports have declined. Gems and jewelry, leather industry, they've all taken a hit because the 50% tariff barrier is blocking Indian exports into the US. So at this critical point, having a FTA with UK and promoting the trade relationship with United Kingdom could help diversify our exports and investments. So UK is an opportunity for India to diversify our exports, diversify our investments, and even to secure investments from UK to India. At a time when we are having a complex relationship with US, we are not able to strike a deal with European Union. This agreement with UK will be of great value to India. But however, things are not so smooth. As I said, we do have a lot of differences, not only in the defense strategic domain, even in the economic domain. After all these initiatives were announced, agreements were signed, Keir Starmer goes back and announces sanctions on Indian companies like Nayara Energy. Nayara is partly owned by Rosneft, the Russian petrochemical major, with Indian involvement. So it's a joint India Russia venture in the oil petrochemical sector. Nayara, along with Reliance Industries, they have been the two largest buyers of Russian energy, Russian oil. And UK has been targeting such Indian companies with fresh sanctions. Nayara's processing facilities in Gujarat have been brought under British sanctions recently. Now, this again shows the hypocrisy of the West. Why India can't rely on the West entirely? Why we can't trust them entirely? Because Europe itself is buying a lot of goods from Russia, including energy from Russia. Even after the Ukraine war started, even after Europe announced its sanctions with United States, they themselves have continued trading with Russia while they expect India to stop oil and energy imports from Russia. This is their hypocrisy, which is being exposed by India. Look at the trade data. In 2024, the European Union had a bilateral trade of $67 billion with Russia. So they're shouting about having sanctions on Russia, criticizing India for trading with Russia. How can they have a trade volume of $67 billion? The EU has been one of the biggest buyers of Russian LNG, more than India sometimes. They have continued trade in services as well. So, what explains this hypocrisy of the European powers and Western powers? Right? So, India rejects such unilateral sanctions. We never follow such unilateral sanctions. So, this again highlights the dichotomy that we face with these Western countries, particularly US and UK. Now, this is your mains practice question on how India UK relationship has evolved into a mature partnership in the defense, trade, and cultural domain. Right? So there are many positives despite the differences that we have. So the question here is mainly focused on the new partnerships that we are forming in defense, trade, and culture. But of course, you can plug in the differences as well, the strategic economic differences that we have. Now, coming to the next topic, the Gaza peace plan. Donald Trump, as he has proclaimed himself as a peacemaker, a negotiator, mediator, he has managed to achieve one more peace agreement. Right? Donald Trump has managed to bring out the Gaza peace plan, not just between Israel and Hamas, but by convincing the other related stakeholders as well. This peace deal, which has taken effect, the phase one of the peace deal has been implemented. It was mediated by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Qatar has always played a big role in such negotiations. I told you it hosted the Taliban leadership and allowed the Taliban to negotiate with the US and acted as a mediator between US and Taliban. Similarly, Qatar hosts the Hamas leadership as well. and has been a key interlocutor between Israel, US on one side, and Hamas leadership on the other side. Egypt is always linked to Hamas because of the Muslim Brotherhood connection. Muslim Brotherhood is a radical entity based out of Egypt. Hamas is a byproduct of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas was born out of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood itself. So the Egyptian government and Egyptian intelligence, they have a lot of connections with Hamas, and they've always acted as mediators. These stakeholders have worked out the peace deal, and it has been basically brought into effect by all the parties involved. But will the ceasefire last? Will it ensure the conflict will end? Because ceasefire is always a temporary arrangement, right? Ceasefire is not a permanent peace treaty. It's not a truce. It'll only bring the hostilities to a temporary halt. It might restart, it might resume any time. Because few months back, there was a peace plan, a ceasefire which had been announced, but both Israel and Hamas broke that. Generally, ceasefires do not last. So the question is, will the ceasefire hold? What are the provisions of this peace deal that US has negotiated? Is it fair to all the parties involved, especially to the Palestinians? That is what we will discuss. But first, a practice question. Let's see if you're aware of the provisions of the peace deal. Which of the following is not a part of the 20-point peace plan that was pushed by Donald Trump? These are the options: establishment of a new international transitional body headed by Trump himself, deployment of a permanent international stabilization force in Gaza, Israel not occupying or annexing any part of Gaza, credible pathway to Palestinian self determination and eventual statehood. Which of them is not a part of the 20-point peace plan? Some are saying D, some are saying B and C as well. Okay. The correct answer here is B, because there is no provision for a permanent international stabilization force. The provision is for a temporary international stabilization force, meaning an international coalition force will be deployed, but for a temporary basis, just to ensure the ceasefire is maintained. Though there is no timeline for how long it will be deployed, it's not going to be a permanent deployment. So B is incorrect. The other statements are right. Now, let's understand what are the provisions of the 20-point peace plan, which has now been brought into effect. First and foremost, this is a peace plan primarily pushed by the US, by the Trump administration. I'm sure you can guess it is largely in favor of Israel. It mainly takes care of Israeli interests more than Palestinian interests. There has been a lot of criticism over this plan, especially over the part where it refers to Palestinians. Again, Palestinians are not included at all in the negotiations. And to determine the future of Gaza and Palestine, there is absolutely no role for Palestinians themselves. So everything is being imposed from the outside. US, Israel, with their allies from the Arab world, they are imposing the deal on the Palestinians. So experts are calling this a form of neo-imperialism, sort of a neo-colonial agenda. So one important provision is that Hamas will have to disarm. This was the stated goal of Israel when it went to war in Gaza after the deadly October 7 terror attack of 2023. So Hamas has to disarm, meaning it has to surrender, give up its fight, and the former extremists and militants, they will be rehabilitated. They'll be given a choice to take refuge in another country if they accept them. Meaning US and Israel will not target them. They would be allowed to seek asylum in other Arab nations if they accommodate them. Now, this is where the biggest question mark lies. Will Hamas really surrender and disarm? Experts say this is highly unlikely. Hamas has survived for nearly 40 years, since 1980s. Even if they end as of now and lay down their arms, if at all they do it, they will revive it in a different form. And unless and until Palestinian statehood is not addressed, Palestine is not allowed to become a legitimate state, which is a right of the Palestinians. Unless and until this demand is not fulfilled by US and Israel, this conflict is likely to drag and continue. Extremism will emerge in a different form as Palestinians fight for their statehood, for their right for self determination, which was snatched by Israel illegally in 1948. Israel has never allowed Palestine to be created as per the two-state plan. US and Western powers have supported Israel in, in this illegal annexation of Palestinian territory. Now, apart from this, the plan says that Gaza will become a terror free zone. It will be a de radicalized terror free zone, which is a welcome step. Of course, Israel's security should also be guaranteed. You cannot have any tolerance for any kind of extremism, radicalism. But the point is, this is something that should have been driven by the Palestinians, especially to reconstruct Gaza. Now, Israel has turned Gaza into rubble. It has bombed almost each and every building in Gaza. It has been turned into an open air prison where 2.5 million Palestinians are trapped. More than 65,000 people have been slaughtered by the disproportionate use of force by Israel. Thousands of children, women, old people, and as well as aid workers have been targeted. Israel is accused of committing a genocide, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. And there is not even one point in this plan about holding Israel accountable for these crimes. So that is where the problem lies with the peace plan, right? Israel gets a free pass to whatever it has done. Israel will just withdraw the troops to a agreed line, provided if Hamas fulfills the commitments. The phase one of the deal is for release of all hostages and exchange of prisoners. This is the phase one, which was implemented few days ago. After finalizing the deal, President Trump suddenly called for the Gaza Peace Summit, which was hosted by Egypt. Last Sunday at Sharm el Sheikh. Sharm el Sheikh is a resort destination in Egypt, located over here, the tip of the Sinai Peninsula. This would be the Sinai Desert of Egypt. At Sharm el Sheikh, the Gaza Peace Summit was hosted, with Trump personally attending the event with the leader of Egypt and leaders of many other countries. Many other stakeholders who were invited, the European partners, the Arab nations, they've all signed the deal expressing their support for this policy. Now, under the policy, once the prisoners and hostages are exchanged, which is what happened on Sunday and Monday, the alive hostages were released by Hamas. Now the remains are being given back as well. And Israel is releasing a few thousand Palestinian prisoners who are held in custody. Now, following this, Israeli defense forces are retreating to the yellow line that you can see on the map. Previously, IDF held this blue line, almost occupying entire Gaza. Now they are retreating to this yellow line, paving the way for the Gazan population to return back to their homes, to their neighborhoods, which has now been basically turned into rubble and dust. Now, if the plan continues as expected, if Hamas lives up to the commitments, disarms itself, then IDF will withdraw entirely from Gaza, going back to the pre October 7th positions. Following this, all the blockades will be lifted at the Rafah border crossing and the other checkpoints, allowing for aid and assistance to flow in. In fact, Israel has already opened up some of the crossing points, allowing humanitarian organizations to deliver the much needed assistance, food, water, medicines. Israel had disrupted the delivery of aid as well. It had targeted even aid workers from international organizations. So now at least aid availability has been made possible, with organizations like the Red Cross, Red Crescent, and others being allowed to bring in a lot of aid material. The World Food Program is pumping food, right? So these humanitarian aspects are being taken care of, at least to some extent. But to determine the future governance and the reconstruction of Gaza, there will be a governing body, a technocratic body, which would be headed by Trump himself. It would include billionaires, technocrats, experts, and for operational administrative reasons, it would most likely be headed by Tony Blair, the controversial former British Prime Minister, who was responsible for the illegal war in Iraq. There is not a single Palestinian citizen who is part of the international board which is being constituted. So basically, foreign billionaires, foreign leaders with questionable backgrounds, with questionable characters, they would be part of this so called board to govern Gaza for the coming months and years. And you don't know till when. There is no deadline for this. There will be an international force which is going to be deployed, and there's no clarity on which countries will contribute the troops. There is no clarity on the timelines, the deadlines, when the international force will be withdrawn. No clarity on this. Eventually, Palestinian Authority is expected to take over the administration. But when will it happen? It's not addressed in the plan. So now the focus is on rebuilding Gaza into some sort of a Middle East Riviera, like Doha or Dubai or Sharjah, and build a resort destination, which would inevitably profit and benefit the Trump industries. Right? Trump himself is a investor in the real estate market, in the recreation market. Right? Trump has spoken about this. It's not that I'm speculating about this. Trump has repeatedly said Trump resorts, casinos will be built here, and we will turn Gaza into a riviera of the Middle East. But what about the Gazan population? Will it really benefit them? The only relief for the Gazan population is the ceasefire, the temporary halt to the hostilities, and a commitment that Palestinians will not be evicted. They'll not be removed from here. Israel previously had stated that it will seek to remove Palestinians from Gaza. So now a commitment has been made that Palestinians can remain in Gaza. So it's as if they are doing a service to Palestinians. This is a right of Palestinians to have their statehood. But US, Israel are essentially turning this into a neo imperial, neo colonial agenda, which is being enforced on them externally. So the lack of Palestinian involvement, no clarity on statehood when it will be granted. Though it says self-determination will be provided, that eventually Palestinian Authority will take over and statehood would be recognized. But there's no clarity on when it will happen because Israel is opposed to it. Though they have agreed to, as of now, there's no guaranteed commitment that it's going to happen. That's why I'm saying the ceasefire might be holding now, but one step here and there from Hamas or from Israel or from US, the deal will fall apart very quickly. So there's no guarantee that this deal will last, the stability and peace will last. We might see a return back to the conflict. So that is what you take away from this development. India was invited as well to the Gaza Peace Summit, but PM Modi could not make it as it was a last minute invite. The event itself was planned at the last minute. So instead, India sent its Minister of State for External Affairs, Kirti Singh. So India was represented at the Gaza Peace Summit. India has openly welcomed the ceasefire and the peace plan. So let's wait and watch what will happen, whether the deal will hold, will it break, or something new will happen. We have to wait and watch. This is your mains practice question. Now, coming to the last section, the small prelims topics which were in the news. These are largely factual. So let's quickly take a look and wrap up the session for today. The Bagram Air Base was in the news. Trump has been in the habit of claiming others' land and territories. He has claimed Panama and the Panama Canal. He has claimed entire Greenland, right? He has claimed Gulf of Mexico, renamed it as Gulf of America. So now he is claiming one of the former military bases of the US in Afghanistan, that is the Bagram Air Base. So knowing the location and its significance is very important. The Bagram Air Base is located to the north of Kabul, a key air base first built by the Soviets when they occupied Afghanistan in 1980s during the Cold War. The Soviets were the ones who built the initial infrastructure here. It was a key operational base for Soviet forces. Later, it was taken over by Taliban, and then when US and the international forces invaded in 2001 after 9/11 attacks, it became the primary operating base of US military forces and the CIA. It was one of the biggest military facilities of the US and the NATO forces. So, following the withdrawal of American forces, Bagram had fallen back under Taliban's control. Obviously, Taliban has full sovereignty over it, as it has formed the interim government in Afghanistan. But now US is trying to claim Bagram Air Base back. It wants to bring back a military presence in the region. And I'm sure you're aware how Pakistan is playing with Trump. Pakistan has not only nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize and given him the credit for brokering a ceasefire with India during Operation Sindoor, but it has willingly sold its minerals, giving access to United States and American companies for exploiting Pakistan's whatever wealth and resources are present. Pakistan claims it has critical minerals and rare earths, but even experts are unsure where it is present. But apparently, Pakistan is willing to share that, and US has struck a deal to tap the resources and the critical minerals wealth of Pakistan. Pakistan has even offered the Pasni port, strategic port where China also has a presence, for American naval operations. Now, India believes that this is a strategic move by Pakistan. Because, see, during Operation Sindoor, India was almost set to bomb Karachi harbor and Karachi port. Just like 1971, Indian Navy was all prepped. Indian Navy had already placed a blockade in the Arabian Sea containing the Pakistani Navy during Operation Sindoor. If things had escalated, continued further, India would have most likely taken aim at Karachi as well, at the harbor and the strategic port and naval base. So experts believe Pakistan is trying to move away its key naval assets towards Gwadar because India would not dare attack Gwadar as it is a Chinese port built with Chinese funds as part of the CPEC project, which is part of Belt and Road Initiative of China. At Pasni port, located close to Gwadar, here as well, China has a presence. Chinese presence has been noted here. Now they are inviting American military presence. So maybe Pakistani strategy is to pull some of the naval vessels and submarines from Karachi, push it towards Gwadar and Pasni. So next time, if there is a conflict between India and Pakistan, India would not dare attack these naval facilities as Chinese and American vessels and probably their personnel might also be present. So Pakistan is trying to create some insurance for itself to deal with any possible future conflicts with India. So there is a possibility of American military presence coming back in Pakistan. And now you're seeing Trump claiming Bagram Air Base. So these moves of the US, it's again driven with one intention, which is to counter the rising military presence of China. For Donald Trump, China is the prime rival, though Trump sees China more of an economic rival than a military strategic rival. Still, the rising Chinese presence and influence is something the US is looking to counter. So, the reason why US is trying to claim Bagram Air Base is most likely to counter Chinese and as well as Russian influence. Because don't forget, Russia is the only country to have officially recognized Taliban. There's a possibility Russia might strike a deal with Taliban, gain control over Bagram, because it was the Soviets who built this in the first place. So to prevent that, to counter Russian Chinese military involvement, probably US is trying to poke its nose back in Afghanistan. So this move of the US has been criticized by Taliban. India has supported the Taliban at the Moscow format. We joined Russia, China, Pakistan as well, Iran and Central Asian countries to support the Taliban and criticize the US for claiming Bagram Air Base. That's why the location is very significant. Next, in Seychelles, a very important Indian Ocean country, elections were held and there is a change in leadership. The incumbent president, former president, Pavel Ram Kalawan, has lost the elections. And opposition leader, who was the speaker as well, Patrick Hermione, has won the elections. The change in government and leadership is likely to have implications for this region, for Indian interests as well. Because see, Seychelles is strategically located in western part of Indian Ocean, closer to East Africa. It's known for being a resort destination, a tourist destination. It's an archipelago of islands, and it has the highest per capita income in Africa. But it does deal with problems such as rising sea levels, submergence of its islands, and climate change. It is also plagued by drug addiction because there are multiple drug trafficking routes in the Indian Ocean, and it pumps drugs into Seychelles as well. Now, look at the map here. You will understand the location of Seychelles, why it is important for India. It's closer to the Horn of Africa, closer to Gulf of Aden and Bab el Mandeb Strait, which is a maritime choke point. It is closer to the Mozambique Channel, which is another important trading route from Europe across the African continent, where ships turn at Cape of Good Hope and enter Mozambique Channel to reach the Arabian Sea and India. These routes are vital shipping lanes. Even the route from Mediterranean through Suez Canal and Red Sea, then via Bab el Mandeb Strait and Gulf of Aden. This is a region affected by organized crime, especially drugs and arms trafficking. This is a region affected by terrorism as well. Countries like Mozambique, Kenya, Tanzania, they're affected by terrorism. Somalia is affected by terrorism. There is large scale piracy coming from Somalia. You have the Houthis of Yemen disrupting shipping in this route. So, small island nations like Seychelles, Mauritius, Madagascar, and others, they are very crucial to deal with all these threats and stabilize the shipping lanes. This is of vital interest to India as part of its Sagar Mahasagar doctrine. Under this, we promise security and growth for all the countries in the region. We have elevated this to the Mahasagar doctrine. In 2015, PM Modi visited Seychelles and we inaugurated the coastal surveillance radars, which have been built by India to track the movement of ships and vessels. We have built similar surveillance radars in Mauritius and Madagascar as well, which are connected with the Indian intelligence network for maritime information. India has even leased an island from Seychelles during this visit, the Assumption Island. You can see that in this map. Seychelles signed a deal with India leasing the strategic Assumption Island. And during this visit, when PM Modi visited Mauritius as well, while launching the Sagar Doctrine and inaugurating the coastal radars, Mauritius leased the Agalega Islands to India. So 2015 was an important year when we launched the Sagar Doctrine and inaugurated the coastal radars in these countries. Two countries here leased these islands to India. Seychelles leased the Assumption Island, Mauritius leased the Agalega Islands. The deal was to build transport infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure, a port, a runway. And experts believe that potentially these are dual use facilities. Though they have a civilian application for trade and connectivity, the same port and runways can be used for military operations as well, turning them into potential military bases of India. Recently, we have completed the projects at Agalega Island. The port and runway has been inaugurated in Mauritius, thanks to the friendly government. But in Seychelles, we have not been able to progress with the deal. There has been a lot of local protests and opposition against foreign involvement, Indian involvement. India suspects the role of China in instigating local protests and opposition. So the previous president, when he was campaigning in 2020, Mr. Ram Kalawan, he had supported India's projects at Assumption Island. But after becoming the president, he turned around and because of the public pressure and the opposition pressure, he denied India the opportunity to build the transport infrastructure. India believes that China might be behind this. So now the change in leadership will have implications, maybe positive or negative. You don't know. The new leader, the new president might favor India, might proceed with the Assumption Island deal and allow India to build the infrastructure. So this will enhance our strategic presence, the trade opportunities, and India's military influence as well, and counter China. But there is the other possibility where the new leader may not go ahead with the deal and cancel the leasing of this island altogether. So that's why these changes in our neighborhood and extended neighborhood is very important. Then we have a small island which was in the news, the Thitu Island in South China Sea. The Thitu Island is in news because the Chinese Navy and Coast Guard have been super aggressive over here with regard to China's claims, illegal claims in South China Sea, especially against Philippines. China has been very, very aggressive over its claims. You can see the location of South China Sea. It's strategically vital. It links Indian Ocean with the Pacific. It's a vital trade route. Roughly 60% of global trade passes through here. 45% of global energy trade passes through this route. South China Sea is rich with resources, with minerals, fisheries, hydrocarbons. India also depends on it. A lot of India's exports imports passes through South China Sea. We have very close relations with Southeast Asian countries to which the islands and the resources belong to. But China has unilaterally claimed most of the exclusive economic zone over here by drawing this so called nine dash line, this U shaped line that you can see here, based on historical claims. But that has no basis in international law. In modern contemporary international law, UN Convention on Law of the Sea, UN clause defines maritime boundaries and how the territories will be divided. But China is disrespecting international rules, claiming all the key islands, especially the Spratly group of islands. These islands belong partially to Vietnam, partly to Philippines, and partly to Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. But China is in dispute with all of them, and especially with Philippines, it has been very, very aggressive. It has lost a case at Permanent Court of Arbitration in 2016 over Scarborough Shoal dispute, where the PCA, an international arbitration body, ruled in favor of Philippines. But China rejected the award of PCA. It disrespected international rules, and it is disrupting freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight. It has been intercepting the movement of ships, vessels, and aircraft. And Chinese Navy Coast Guard, they even threaten Philippines boats and fishing vessels. So at places like Sandy Cay, it has been reported that China has occupied the entire islet for itself. This is where Thitu Island is located, where the recent clash occurred, where a Chinese vessel belonging to its Navy and Coast Guard crashed with a Philippines boat deliberately. They even fired a water cannon. So these escalations could easily turn into a conflict, threatening stability in this region. So, can you find out the names of other islands, islets, and shoals and reefs which are disputed between China and Philippines? There are many more small islets, shoals, and reefs which are in the news because of the tensions between China Philippines. Can you please find that out and mention that in the comments? Coming to the last article, India is hosting the chiefs conclave of the UN troop contributing countries. The troop contributing countries contribute the peacekeepers for UN peacekeeping forces, also known as the Blue Helmets. These are the peacekeepers who are part of UN peacekeeping missions. But the problem is the deployment of peacekeepers, their safety, their well being is entirely the responsibility of UN Security Council. The P5 countries with the veto, the five permanent members, they decide where the peacekeeping missions will be deployed, where the peacekeepers will be deployed. The concern for troop contributing nations is that they don't have a say in this. They are the ones contributing their soldiers, risking the lives of their soldiers. Usually, for UN peacekeeping missions, the main contribution comes from developing underdeveloped countries: India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Philippines. These are the countries, even Nepal and Sri Lanka. They are the primary contributors. In fact, the P5 countries rarely contribute. Even if they contribute, numbers are very small. The concern is in many conflict zones, war zones, the rebels or the terrorists or sometimes government forces, they have targeted the blue helmets, killing the peacekeepers. India is the one which has suffered the maximum number of losses. Till date, India has contributed 290,000 personnel from different forces, from army to our police forces to our central armed police forces. We are currently active in multiple missions with 5,000 Indian troops deployed around the world. India has suffered the highest casualties. More than 180 Indian soldiers have been killed, martyred during peacekeeping missions, and there is no accountability for this. That's why India is pushing for reforms of the UN, the UNSC, and how the UN peacekeepers will be managed. So, India is hosting this conference for this purpose, bringing all the troop contributing countries together, discussing the safety of the peacekeepers, and pushing for reforms at the UNSC to ensure that troop contributing countries are also included in the decisions taken with relation to UN peacekeeping forces. That is why the Chiefs Conclave is important. It's being hosted by the Indian Army. So, in the next session, we will discuss the developments of this conclave with many more interesting topics. Maybe there will be some new developments regarding what we have discussed today. We will follow up on this in the next class. So, with this, I bring my detailed analysis of IR current affairs for the month to an end. I hope you guys have liked the session. If you understood everything, benefited from this class, please support us with your likes. That is what pushes us to do better. And if you're liking the initiative, share your comments, let us know what you think, and do share the videos with other aspirants. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before I end the class, I wish everyone a very happy Diwali. May this festival bring light, guide you on the path to success in this examination, and let's hope that all your dreams come true. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.